I'm Todd Crawford,
I'm Eric Zavinski.
and we are too cool for the comic shop.
That we are. And this week we're going to be talking about, in preparation for from this director, Christopher Nolan's movies in the 2010s. Let it be known that we already did an episode on the Dark Knight Trilogy. So that's 3 of his films right off the bat, already covered a few months ago. But we wanted to just talk about some of these other ambitious films that came out in the 2010s.
Yeah, well, first off, I just want to say, I didn't think about this, but I think our first Christopher Nolan episode might be my favorite on the whole show. I remember that being a really fun episode.
It was. We went into pretty big detail, and we talked about, it was just 3 movies, and we've had podcasts that are longer or covered more installments of a franchise or something, but yeah, it was like maybe our 5th or so episode, and we went into deep philosophical life conversations, I think, towards the end, especially when we were talking about The Dark Knight in the middle there.
Yeah, because I remember we got really deep into which of Batman's villains was the cutest versus which one we think would be a better long-term boyfriend or girlfriend.
Harvey Dent before or after the scarring is hard toss-up there.
Exactly. We really got into the details. But
exactly. We'll have to watch. We'll put a card on the video or something. We'll see if Todd knows how to do that.
We all know I don't.
See if I remember.
So anyhow, yeah, we're talking about these 3 films, and something I was thinking about a lot, because I watched.
Oh, we haven't name dropped the films yet, I guess. So if they don't know the filmography, so that is Inception, Interstellar, and Dunkirk for this episode, which you probably know if you clicked on the thumbnail.
Yeah, spoiler alert in the title.
Exactly.
But I watched Inception. I'm gonna fuck this up. The whole episode, Inception, Interstellar. It's really not fair.
Well, I pointed this out to you. I was like, man, I love those movies that start with an IN prefix. He's corny for that, man. So what can you say? Exactly. You're in the movie. That's what he's trying to say. You are immersed instead of immersed.
Yeah. So the others I was pretty good on by memory. Dunkirk a little bit less so because I've only seen that one once. But it was a pretty vivid
but
experience.
It was the most recent. It was 2017.
Exactly. I saw that one on IMAX, which is my first IMAX movie, I believe. So that was really
very cool.
But Inception I've actually never seen in full before. So I felt like it'd be cheating if I didn't see it because I just kind of missed it in theaters and I catch it on TV, one of those kind of things.
Right.
So I watched it the first time yesterday. It's so weird going back to that point in time, which I guess kind of segues right into the discussion about the film. But it was right before the switch in the standards for mainstream blockbusters, because I would say The Dark Knight set that standard. And then between that and Dark Knight Rises, we got Interstellar. And before Dark Knight Rises, people kind of turned on Nolan. It was really the Avengers. When the Avengers came out and Joss Whedon, in my opinion, lowered the bar for cinema and really hurt American cinema quality in the mainstream, of course. People didn't want these huge, ambitious, I don't want to say groundbreaking, but pushing of technology and the idea of what an American blockbuster could do anymore. They wanted a fucking sitcom with product placement jokes where you're having the serious meeting and then you hear crunch. And there's Thor, you're eating Doritos. And the joke's Doritos, so you're like... Oh,
that man is playing Galaga. That man is playing Galaga. That's probably my favorite product placement. At least it's an old video game.
Yeah. So, it was so weird watching Interstellar and seeing, when he was at his peak...
Wait, Interstellar or Inception?
Inception, I'm sorry.
You've already done it. You're already doing it. Maybe you should just call it the 2010 movie and the 2014 movie. That's what you should do.
That might be more helpful. Just the Leo movie and the other one. But
yeah. Just call it the Leo and the McConaughey, and yeah, there you go.
But yeah, seeing that and seeing what it was doing, because even though I've seen the scenes before and it's been 10 years, watching it, I watched the first half last night and the second half this morning. I was just I've never seen anything quite like this. not just in like a mainstream big budget movie, but ever. And I'm not like saying I'm like a
Right.
huge cinephile, but I've seen more movies than most people. I've seen at least a good, I'm gonna say 1,500 at a guess, and that's only like ones I've documented by IMDb and other profiles. And I can't think of anything quite like it. I mean, it takes a lot from A Nightmare on Elm Street. You get like some heist movie stuff, but just the culmination of like the idea, the way it's executed, the way the film's set up, the camera work, it's really unlike anything else. And it's really just kind of sad looking at that,
Right.
and then seeing some shit like Spider-Man Homecoming, where it looks like a
Right.
fucking student, like college campus comedy film.
No, I know what you mean, and yeah, I think that's where some film cynicism comes into play because you recognize like a movie like this, and I didn't see this movie in theaters either. I was just into my later teenage years is when I really became like a Christopher Nolan follower and like started to realize like, oh, he has other movies. I love The Dark Knight. It's one of my favorite things ever, right? So it's like Nolan was really, to give some background on me, basically the first director where I was like, I need to see all his movies. And there aren't many directors I've even done that with to this day where I can say I've seen all their movies or close to all their movies. But there's just something about the difference in all of his movies, but also they're all treated with the same kind of level of uniqueness and ambition. And people definitely have their favorites, and people think some are way better than others. But Inception was one of those movies that really opened my eyes to be like, oh my gosh, like you can make a crazy, awesome, like blockbuster experience that is completely wholly original. It's not a franchise. It's not a sequel. It's not a patient. It's just like you said, kind of that like pure idea taken really far,
Yeah, and to add something, just a little bit of a footnote with all the different projects, level of care. Another thing is, even though they are very different in many ways, he works with the same kind of people, not just actors, but the cinematographer and all that.
Composers.
Yeah, composer Hans Zimmer. I forget the cinematographer's name. I should know it. I should look it up. I feel like I'm cheating if I do.
Right. I've been in some of the lead up to Tenet here is his release. That if we're putting this out on Saturday, the movie came out, a couple days ago. I've seen him talk about, working with Nolan before and things like that, but I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Yeah, I keep thinking Wally Pfister, but I know that's not right.
But no, he definitely's got this team that he works with on many of his movies. And I'm not sure how much you know about like Nolan and his like personal life, but he works with his brother and his wife on pretty much every movie he's ever made.
Yeah, I did know he wrote with his brother.
Yeah, and his wife is Emma Thomas. They don't share the same last
Okay.
name. And she produces a lot of his movies. I mean, so they really and some of his daughter was the inspiration kind of for the father-daughter relationship in Interstellar. And his son has been in I believe he's in Dark Knight. I think I might be getting this wrong. I think he's Jim Gordon's son at the end of that movie. So he just, I don't know, really puts his family like in his craft, I guess, and and maybe that's part of like where the passion comes from.
Yeah, and I think that's somewhat keeps it grounded. That's what I was going to say about Inception, the Leo one, is that despite
Right.
like I've always heard how like convoluted it is, and the parodies we go within a dream, within a dream, within a dream. And honestly, what shocked me was how simple it was to follow. Maybe
Right.
it's contextual, but like, and what I think holds that together is that it has this very old Hollywood feel, despite all these new elements being introduced by having
Right.
the heist setup, where it's like the bank job. You know what they have to do. You know the people on the team, and it's never too cliche, but it sticks pretty close to the archetypes that we know, and that's kind of
Yeah.
what a movie like this needs.
I agree. And going back to your point about it being simple to follow, I think it is simultaneously simple and complex. Colton watched it with me for the first time this year when we watched it like months ago. And I kind of rewatch Inception, Interstellar like yearly because I really love the movies. But even he, first time viewing was like following it pretty darn well. And I think the difference is like, I think the story is pretty straightforward. The story, like what the characters want and what they're trying to achieve, I think that is simple. But the plot surrounding it is complex, like how the dreams work off of each other, all the hoops and hurdles that they have to go through in order to achieve the goals of the story. That's the complex part. But the story itself is simple. That's kind of how I've always thought of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of like minute details and stuff like that people have picked up on and theorized about. For instance, Leo's wedding ring, and he only wears those in the dreams and stuff like that. But yeah, I guess to clarify, the story itself, I always figured it was going to be like overly complicated the whole time. There's a little bit of that a lot of movies focus on dreams have, where you think it's real, then you find out it's a dream. I believe the beginning of the movie does that, as well as the famous scene with Ellen Page and Leo at the was it the diner in France or whatever, at a coffee shop, and then she realizes a dream as they're talking, and the city.
Yeah, and they really only do that in those two scenes, like the water breaking into the castle on the beach, and then him and her together. Those are both, in my opinion, exposition scenes. It's just to teach you that, hey, seeing might not be reality. But for a large chunk of the movie, I would say like 3/4, at least 2/3 of the film, they're in the tiered layer of like foredreams. And then that is like, obviously you see where they started. You're not thrown in media res, because if you're thrown in media res, like those early scenes in the movie, then that's why you don't know what's reality. But like you see them get into it, from the beginning for the main heist of the movie. And I think that's why it's like, now what's a dream and what's not, I guess.
Yeah, and what I was gonna say, it's like it explains, it gives you the thrill of like not quite knowing what's going on, then experiencing it in the opening scene of the movie, which is typical story beat stuff. Then it explains it to you in like this, basically the rest of the first act. It tells you point by point the scene with them at the diner in the street in France, the scene where Leo wakes up, and they kind of talk about, so like they really take you into it and give you all the rules for the rest of the movie, the whole first hour at least. I mean, they really break it down. It's not, I don't know, it always has a reputation of being hard to follow or overly complex to the point of being a fault. And I don't know, maybe I just
and I would kind of say maybe a better critique of the movie is that maybe it gives too much exposition heavy stuff in the first hour, and that to me is a more valid critique of this movie. I like this movie's kind of irreplaceable to me, but no movie's perfect, and I would kind of say that they might focus too much on exposition and not enough on character building for that first hour.
There is some, and the characters are pretty loose, honestly.
They are.
Little things where Joseph Gordon-Levitt's like a little bit nebbish. Leo gets a lot of attention to him, and Ellen Page, she's an architect.
The way I see it, 2.5 characters get a lot of attention. I would say that Leo and Ellen, their characters are the two main characters.
Yeah, because Ellen has a relationship with Leo, and her concern for the she knows more than them, so she's given more.
Her concern for the group because of the things that she's privy to, like, and that's kind of that internal drama that Leo isn't able to move on kind of without her, and it's really that kind of colleague turning into friendship, relationship, and doing what needs to be done that's where most of the drama is for me. But I think an underrated part of the movie is the whole what they're actually there to do in the Inception. Like, yes, his memory of his wife and trying to get to his kids is like personal plot that you're following for the hero. I actually find it very touching for Cillian Murphy's character, that the whole giant bank heist on a snowy mountain, all that is just to make him think that his dad cared about him. It's like such a simple, like childish, precious, innocent thing that they're actually trying to, incept into his mind, right? It's not, it is like that simple idea. And just, I think when you watch it for the first time, at least for me, it was very surprising that, like, damn, it was just putting like a pinwheel in a safe, like connotations for that person and what that meant and how it recontextualized everything.
Yeah, what was interesting to me was watching it, and I think it's kind of a commentary on film. The Inception, putting an idea into someone's mind and getting them to dream something. Obviously,
Right.
that's kind of what the filmmaker's doing to us, the viewer. And similarly,
Right.
I thought it was interesting that the scene with his father, where his father's on his deathbed and he's talking to him, is emotional, and it's genuinely touching. But what's so interesting to me is that it is on a surface level. But then you think about them manipulating him, and the reason why they're doing it is because of essentially it's basically trying to stop a monopoly that his father owned and he is now inheriting. And
Right.
even though it is good intentions technically, even if it is at the behest of a rival company, it's still very manipulative and morally wrong what they're doing.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
what's interesting is to be genuinely touched by it while also realizing that you're being manipulated just like his character is.
Well, and that's kind of the beauty of the movie for me, because sometimes people like to say, well, this movie doesn't really have a story. It's just a bunch of gimmicks and flashing crap on the screen. And if a movie, to me, it makes me feel those conflictions like you just described. And it's basically, this movie is a tragedy, like through and through. And it's basically got a tinge of hope at the very end. But even with that ending shot, it's questionable. And we can all choose to take from that what we want to take from it. Because I always like to have my personal headcanon, what I think, what happened after that ambiguous final shot. I love movies with ambiguous final shots, but I also like to choose what narrative I think is true, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. One thing
I think most people like to do that, and I think this movie is tinged with just enough little hopeful stuff in mostly a tragic story. About unethical people doing unethical things and, getting your wife killed because you were selfish, essentially, or trying to stop evil businessmen from controlling the world by manipulating a person's childhood. Like, all of those things are awful, whatever way you slice it, whoever's perspective you're looking at. It's somehow tinged with some sense of humanity at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, that's what makes it an interesting movie that people rewatch rather than just see as a blockbuster. And I don't know, I want to bring this up in this episode because I was just obsessing over today how the populace turned on Nolan. Like, his new Tenet is getting middling reviews, and they're calling it a humorless affair. And I just kept asking myself, like, well, it's not a fucking comedy.
Yeah, no, I've heard some of those critiques too, and there's definitely people who really like this new movie Tenet as well. It sounds like it might be one of his more divisive films. And usually with divisive films, I err more on the side of, damn, I really liked that, because I don't know, I guess as an artist or a storyteller or whatever, I usually like it when people just fucking take risks. And usually the movies that take risks are the only ones that end up being divisive.
Yeah, some of my favorite movies are just utterly hated. And
Right.
I don't put much
Yeah.
stock in critics. Sometimes I have good things to say, sometimes I don't. It all just matters circumstantially. But I was just curious on your take on that and how it's viewed, because Christopher Nolan's your favorite director, you said.
Yes, no, he is. And like, so there's obviously a bias there. But sometimes if I'm looking at the criticism of film, I always try to take the bias out of a statement like that. Like, one has to wonder if someone's calling the movie humorless, which is actually kind of interesting because I've watched some other reviews, spoiler free, of the movie so far, and people have said it's actually got quite a few jokes in it. So I really don't even know what that means at that point.
Well, that's how I
if that's true.
That's how I feel about, like, not so much Inception. People who typically don't like Nolan seem to like that one. Or I'm sorry,
Right.
Interstellar. It's the one
Right.
I
Well,
typically
we'll get
see
to
more so than
Interstellar in a
Inception.
second.
Yeah, but
Because the reasons people don't like Interstellar are very different than the reasons they don't like Inception. And, there's definitely a
That's
different
totally
crowd
true.
there. And that's why I like to compare and contrast. But to get back to the humorless statement, it's like, Well, you always have to wonder, what is the bias of the reviewer there? Have they been movie hungry for 6 months, and are they wanting a Bill and Ted Face the Music when they go to see Tenet? Or or are they expecting a blockbuster like Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker or Avengers Endgame? Like, I mean, I think people go in with their own biases, no matter what people profess to say they don't have bias. And we all do. And I think sometimes some film critics are audacious enough to act like they don't. But I feel like that, we all do. It's kind of hard to deny. Like, I think it's very unlikely that I dislike Tenet. I'll just say it straight up. I really love his ambition and, the twists and turns I'm taken with on the story. So I think it's very unlikely that I'll dislike the film. I'll say it right now. But at the same time, if I can recognize my own bias, then at least I did that.
Yeah, and I think that trying to profess any objectivity is typically just a futile effort, in my opinion. I don't really believe, and I certainly don't believe critics prescribe to any such ideology, because I just see them as like petulant children with these kind of comments. Because like Interstellar, I always fuck it up every time. Inception. There's a lot of jokes in that movie. They're not. Once again, Leo's not walking out with a big beer gut and dreadlocks or whatever halfway through the film because he's upset his wife died. But like, there's little jokes in it, but they're not laugh track, over the top kind of humor. It's not goofy. It takes his plot and characters seriously, but there's still humor and irony. Maybe not like laugh out loud funny all the time.
Right. And that's kind of the underrated thing that, Nolan's not known for his humor in his movies, but in a way, even in the Dark Knight films, we just rewatched those, Colton and I, just because it's been a while. And like, yeah, there's humor in all of those too. I mean, like, to lesser degrees, like the Dark Knights, most of the Dark Knights jokes are like Joker related, and they're also like just as dark as they are, maybe sometimes like kind of humorous. But yeah, I don't know. Nolan's films, like Inception especially, they just seem to be like people, dicking around kind of humor, like what real people do. Like, I don't know. Like Tom Hardy and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character like have these jokes throughout the movie where they like kind of like, I don't know. I think Tom Hardy's character is like kind of like almost flirting with him to an extent, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character is always like off guard, and they like compare the sizes of their guns and shit.
That's
and
what I was going to bring up. That one scene, don't be afraid to dream big, darling. And he comes with the grenade launcher. That's a Marvel joke. I mean, that legitimately would be in an Iron Man movie.
Yeah, no, that's kind of one of the more overt ones for sure. But yeah, no, if people are complaining that there isn't, humor, it's like some of it's subtle and some of it's more dorky. But it just feels a little more grounded, I guess. But like when Leo is like laughing at Ellen Page's character, like I never remember her character's name, which it's probably bad for me. I've seen this movie like a dozen times, so I can't remember half the character's name. Yeah. But like he kind of like laughs at her when she like doesn't realize a thing is a thing, and like stuff like that is just kind of like more, they're not shooting for big jokes here. It's just kind of like people humor, and that's kind of relatable, and that's why it usually will get a chuckle out of me, even on like the 7-3 watch, because it's just more relatable, I guess.
It's more natural. But what I want to bring up, and this is kind of a tangent, and I apologize for that, but like I always think with people harping on that for me like this, so what about like, does Bergman suck? I mean, the Seventh Seal has a lot of jokes, and it's a very humorous movie, but it's a very serious meditation on death and religion and, the plague. And there are jokes in it. There's a lot of jokes in it. Are they just watching, like, this fucking sucks? What, Death's not just playing Galaga?
Well, and I think to go back to the comparison to more standard blockbuster cinema in the past decade or so, the MCU, Disney live action remakes, things like that, things that people are seeing by the droves. I think it's kind of been brainwashing to an extent that you should expect equal parts comedy, equal parts drama, equal parts action, equal parts everything you could ever want in a movie. And it's like a movie like Avengers, tries to have all of it. And I just feel like kind of brainwashed in like we just expect blockbusters especially to have equal parts action, drama, comedy when like some blockbusters should be like 90% drama, action, and maybe a tiny bit of comedy, you know? And sometimes people don't respect the differences, I guess, anymore.
Yeah, and you know, we've talked about the Marvel movies before. People can look up our Avengers videos. Like, we had very positive things to say about some of those
But
movies.
we
It's
definitely like some of them. I would say, you know, there's like a quarter of them that are pretty damn awesome. And then there's like the second quarter, like the B tier, which is pretty good. And then like, you know, the other half are just kind of completely bendable, you know, like they're interchangeable. Like it doesn't matter, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, my ultimate point with this before we go into the actual film discussion is if you're like the arbiters of this kind of culture, and this certainly isn't a great example, but I saw Vice post an article just today actually. Maybe Christopher Nolan movies just suck, I believe is the title of it. And I just think like, you know, Vice is the lowest of the low. That's whatever.
Right.
But like some of these like critics saying like I didn't spill my Skittles. I was watching this movie from laughing so hard at the raccoon getting called Ratchet. Like I just think like you should just be fired. Like,
Right.
I'll straight up say like
Yeah.
if somebody sent me like an article like that for Long Shot Books, I'd be like fuck you, just stop.
Yeah, I know. Well, and that's just the thing. I don't feel like, you know, do we not respect the differences and all the uniqueness that artistry can provide anymore? Or we just, again, it just makes me cynical sometimes because, again, Nolan's not the only director I love. I really just love pop culture. I just like new shit. I truly just love to see new ideas. And I don't care if it's Star Wars, the biggest franchise on earth, or if it's like a fucking indie film. Like I just like seeing new stories. That's just really it. And you know, as big as Nolan is, and I feel like that's another reason why people might have, you know, hate for him or content because like he's maybe been the most successful with like original movie blockbusters than perhaps anyone. You know, maybe Tarantino, a couple others are close, and Spielberg, but I'm talking more modern day. I guess like I can see why people, you know, maybe just don't like that, but I mean, you can't say his movies aren't different than from a lot of the stuff that we get,
You know
regardless of
my
whether you like or hate them.
you know my opinion on it, and it's kind of generalization straw manny. I think it's a difference between people who support outdoors versus people who support corporations and mediocrity. And this is
Right.
kind of a blunt statement, but I feel like people who don't like Christopher Nolan, and I know people whose opinions I respect that don't like him, they have valid reasons not to, I get it. But generally what I see are people who are just kind of put off by ambition and heart. And
Right.
I think they see Christopher Nolan and he's doing these movies that they're fucking crowd pleasers. Let's be real. They are crowd
Yeah.
pleasing blockbusters, like pretty much all of them.
Yeah. I mean, well,
Not all of
half
them,
the
but most
reason
of
why I
them.
love them, you know, it's that kind of surface level where it's like, shit, I get to see a car crash in reverse, like with one shot. Like, I'm excited as fuck to see shit like that. And that doesn't even have anything to do with the story of the movie of Tenet. But man, I am ready. Like, so, you know, half of it is like the roller coaster that you get to go on. If a roller coaster movie can like also make me think and like reflect and contemplate on shit, then you just gave me a really fun fucking 2.5 hours, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, it still has that intimacy. That's the thing. They get huge, but it always has that core heart with the story and
Right.
characters. And yeah, I mean, typically the same people I see who like will dismiss a Nolan movie are ones where like if you dare say anything bad about Marvel, how dare you criticize this $1 billion corporation over at Disney? And I really think it's corporatism versus individualism.
Well, and some companies and some, you know, every situation is a little different. Sometimes they give a director and his vision more freedom, even if it is under a giant corporate banner. I think Warner Brothers has just kind of let Nolan do whatever the fuck he wants, like honestly, because he just does something crazy new every time. And I guess we should just get into the next movie to just touch on that more because Interstellar is so different from Inception in many, many ways, but also shares some very crucial similarities.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say, and I'll wrap up Inception with this because I do think I think it's important to note for each movie. I feel like Inception was only made because he made The Dark Knight. I feel like maybe they would have given him money, but the budget that he got, all that for the idea, I definitely feel like they're like, okay, you just made the biggest blockbuster ever. Go crazy.
Well, you're not entirely wrong, and I don't know how much you know about the history, and just this is my last point on Inception.
I know it was a very old script, or at least the concept was.
Correct. Yes, that's what I was going to say. Inception was essentially his high school. I'm like 18 years old. I wrote an idea. It was in my head. I wrote it down on paper. I don't know if it will ever become anything. Like, that's like super relatable. I feel like you and I have been there with things that we've written. And it's like he definitely refined it, throughout his adult life. But it was one of the projects that he had like always wanted to make. But obviously with the dream bending and all that shit, like would need crazy resources for that. And like you said, after The Dark Knight, that really elevated him to, for the next decade, really just be allowed to kind of do whatever the hell he wants.
Yeah, and one thing, this is my real final point, because I have to shoehorn it in, because tied for my favorite movie is the original Nightmare on Elm Street, directed by Wes Craven. And it's so funny the similarities between this film and that film, because they're dream movies, There's not that many movies that take place in dreams. That's like,
and there should be more. There should be more, frankly.
That would be great. But I love that not only that they have that, but they also have the rotating room special effect, where the original Nightmare on Elm Street had the girl. It's basically a recreation of Psycho, where you think Janet Leigh's character is going to be your protagonist, but then she's killed in the first act, at the end of the first act. They do the same thing in A Nightmare on Elm Street with a character named Tina. And what they do is they have the one actor, I don't know if he's like strapped into bed or what, but the room's rotating so that she's being murdered on the ceiling, crawling across the ceiling, up the wall across the ceiling as the room's rotating. And they also do that with when Johnny Depp's character is killed and all of his blood goes from the bed up to the ceiling. And there's actually, when they did that effect with all this cow blood, real blood, it wound up hitting lights and stuff and causing an electrical problem, something insane. And in this movie, they also do the rotating room with the famous fight that Joseph Gordon-Levitt has in the hallway, which is similar in theory, but the execution's very, very different.
Right. But I think you're getting to the point of the commonality here is like, both movies super ambitious, and they really freaking did all those things.
Yeah, exactly. And
because like the rotating hallway, they could have like CGI finangled it. They could have like got stunt doubles, but no, they built a rotating freaking goddamn hallway in a giant soundstage, and they just threw Joseph Gordon-Levitt in there and like, hey, you're gonna just tumble around in this shit and learn to do it. And I just love that. I respect that so much. He
runs up the wall when it first starts, and he's starting to go sideways, and he goes from the floor to the wall to the ceiling, because the wall's a little bit uneven with like the textures of it or something. There's like different door frames or whatever. I kept thinking as I was watching it, what if he just misstepped a little bit? He would have sprained his ankle so easily.
I love those kinds of things, and that's another reason I like Nolan in general, is just he gives a real practicality. He's very, like you said, kind of old film. Let's do it live. Let's do it real. Let's really blow up a hospital in The Dark Knight. Let's really make a spinning hallway. Just crazy shit that like I don't think a lot of people want to go to that effort, but man,
and another thing too is
the ambition, but also the fuck it attitude to be like, all right, let's do it.
And when you see it there, when you see the hospital blow up, when you see the room rotate, like the hospital blowing, it goes back to Kurosawa, like basically burning like entire villages in his movies. Like you could blow up a planet in a movie with CGI, or as many hospitals as you want in an entire city with CGI, and I won't care. But then I see like one tower burning down in a Kurosawa samurai film, like, oh my god, this is insane.
Yeah, you can know if it's happening. I feel like people who really know film can be like, oh shit, that they did that one.
Yeah, exactly. And not just like on one hand analyzing like how they do this, how the actor do this stunt. That's very enjoyable to
It
break it
is, and when
down.
that really helps on
But
rewatches too, because like if you rewatch a movie and you know the story, you're not focusing on like narrative in front of you. Sometimes it's fun to rewatch movies like this too and be like, all right, how the hell did they do this again? Oh, that's right, that's how they did it.
exact, and also just makes the experience more visceral typically.
It does because when you can know facts about the movie and just kind of like these little things gonna give you a deeper appreciation and help know the what's going on with the people behind it. Yeah, I know that was like a good long like extra 5 minutes on Inception, but yeah, we could talk a lot.
Yeah, so let's wrap it up with a rating and a final thought.
Oh man, do you really want to? It's a 10 out of 10 for me, and I know it has flaws, and you know even I might change some of the writing. I might flesh out some of the supporting cast. It's hard to put a number grade on what this movie does to me. Watched it probably 10 times in several years, and it's just one of those movies that just completely transports me. Like it's just the way it makes me feel like I felt dreaming in my real life. Like it's just I don't know how he has captured that essence of just kind of this gray, area of like just floating and just like not knowing how to feel. A lot of Inception is just you're strapped in for this roller coaster and you're like grappling with emotions until it reaches this like peak with Hans Zimmer's Time is one of my favorite songs in any movie ever. Just like it might be my favorite like monologue ending to a film where there's no dialogue and you just kind of have this like wash over you feeling of like the dream is over. And it's kind of like if you have a good dream in real life and you wake up from it, you just have this weird ethereal feeling. And every time I watch Inception, I get that feeling while I'm awake. And it's hard to put a number grade on something like that. So if I have to, I'm giving it a 10.
I think I'm gonna go 4.5.
Yeah, 4.5.
No, I'm gonna give it a 9.5, and it's really I want to give it a
Really?
10. There's just one little bit about it that's just like, just I don't know, just a nitpick, and I'll openly say it's a nitpick. But some of the dialogue, like for instance, Cillian Murphy, there's a scene where after he comes to grips with his father, he says like, "My father wasn't disappointed in me because I was trying to be, because I wasn't him. My father was disappointed in me because I was trying to be. He wanted me to be my own man, and that's what I'm going to be." Like stuff like that's so expository and just on the
Right. Well,
nose
and like,
writing, and I don't mind that it's a script. I don't mind that it's not how people talk
no,
like a Tarantino movie or whatever. Not
I
everything has
get
to be
it.
Veronica Mars, but it does take me out just enough for me to give it a half point off, which when you're
No,
pretty much at a perfect score, I mean.
right. Well, and again, if I was being a more objective film critic, man, I'd be there with you. I might even give the movie a 9 because again, no
Some of the
movie is
CGI
perfect.
doesn't hold up.
Right.
Oddly enough,
But
just the
like,
scene where Leo and Ellen go from walking the street to the street that's like facing upward,
oh yeah,
that one shot's so awkward. It doesn't matter. It's like not even a whole
it's
second.
awkward. I know what you're talking about. When they go from straight 90-degree angle, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's probably the most awkward bit of special effects, which again is like 2 seconds long. But I agree, and I feel like with my objective eye, I can say that that's one of Nolan's faults in his movies in general. He will often after the body language of the movie tells you these things because seeing Cillian Murphy's character have that kind of look in his eye when he has that scene with his father on the dream deathbed, you kind of already understand what he's later going to say in that line when he crawls out of the river. It's kind of like, okay, the movie didn't have to say it to me a second time. Now, perhaps to most folks, maybe that it did, because again, we seem to be you and I like on the end of this movie isn't that complicated, but people who think it is, that line might be there for them. And I'm not trying to talk down to people, but like, that might be why it's there.
Yeah. My only final thoughts beyond that are just on a personal level. It was so strange watching this movie because I've been dealing with the last 2 years, maybe three, chronic nightmares every single day. People that I used to know, family members have passed away, just stuff like that all the time. Just like
Right.
memories seeping into dreams in a very unhealthy way that's caused insomnia quite a while. Sometimes
Well,
it's
then you
just
need to watch Christopher Nolan's Insomnia.
yeah. I like that movie. I need to see the movie it's remaking, but
Yeah,
I'm one of those people that likes insomnia quite a bit. But
me
anyhow,
too. Anyway,
I've
yeah.
been really trying to confront that head on and deal with it in my own way just very recently, and it was kind of cathartic and strange watching it and like what Leo's character's going through. Mine's not quite so dramatic,
Right.
but very similar kind of thing. So it was interesting on a personal level, but I really enjoyed the movie. It might be my favorite Nolan movie at this point. I don't know.
No, it's up there, and it's I have like a very like my top four favorite Nolan movies are like absolutely my top four favorite, and they can almost be interchangeable. But yeah,
Exactly.
Leo's character arc is very broadly relatable because it's just kind of that feeling of whatever your past trauma is like. Dreams always, if you remember your dreams, at least for me, like your dreams like always try to suck you back into your past and into your trauma sometimes. And I feel like trying to move on from that is like it's generally the story of his character. And it's a pretty unique story for a blockbuster film to have because moving on from trauma is really not something that's explored a whole lot in blockbuster filming. And that's basically what it is here.
Exactly. And I love how it shows his character go from demonizing his wife to just like kind of just accepting the reality of the situation. You know what I mean? Like we all
Right.
demonize maybe a parent or an old friend or an ex or whatever. But then when you
Right.
really get down to the core of it, they're just as human as you are. And there's another side to every story, and how it shows that just by her just intruding in the dreams. Like, who is that? What's she doing? As a scary character. To the end, where it's just
Right.
very sad, and she's a victim of his actions, and just in as many ways as he's a victim of his regret is very
Exactly.
relatable, and we all have regret in some form. So that embodiment of it, I really
When everybody has
appreciated.
to learn that acceptance that they have done wrong and they have done people wrong too, and he doesn't really accept that until like the very climax of the movie when the whole city is like crumbling and disintegrating. Very powerful.
Exactly. So moving on to the next in movie.
Yes, which is Inception, right? No,
That's it.
what is it called again, Todd?
It's this one's Interstellar. So the
What's your experience with this film? Because I have very clear memories of it, so I'm curious to see what yours are.
Oh yeah, I do too. It's funny. I saw the movie with two of the people that are kind of my Marion Cotillard with my nightmares. Um, it was just really funny. I didn't think about that till
Yeah,
now. I have nothing. I'm not saying anything negative about these people. It's just kind of a past thing. But I saw it with some friends in college, and then I saw it with someone I was dating at the time, and
right.
it was really like I don't usually see movies in theaters twice, but it was really enjoyable. I had issues with the movie, but overall I really enjoyed it. One of the things that stuck out to me immediately was this was originally going to be directed by Spielberg, and going by the script and stuff, because I think it was floating around for a while, getting picked up by different directors and studios, but never quite making it to film until, of course, it did.
Mhm.
Um, it was funny how Spielbergian it was because I do think Nolan is very much of the Spielberg film school. And I
Right.
think that's why I like him so much because he reminds me of a young Spielberg in so many ways. But McConaughey and the wheat fields and the farm and the flannel and all that. It's a different side one you don't really see in the other movies, and that really makes it stand out to me. Aside even before the space stuff kicks in.
Right. And I think even just simple things like that, the salt of the earth stuff, these feel like, just normal kind of Americans, they're in like the future and whatever, but the future doesn't look like the future. It's just like we're still farming because like shit sucks, which honestly, the more the more 2020 goes on, maybe we're heading towards Interstellar, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
We just need a drought, and that we'll probably get there.
I was kind of thinking that. I was like, when you said it took Leo like half the city getting destroyed for him to come to terms with things, like, well, I guess I missed that mark.
Right, right. But yeah, I think it's something that's as simple as them wearing flannel and being farmers and all that stuff that kind of hints that this movie is different, and this might be the only Nolan movie that, in my opinion, is more focused on the emotions of the characters for the majority of the runtime rather than the plot. Now, the plot is still very important and kind of complex with the time dilation, the interdimensional travel, lots of big space ideas that are pretty realistic to space. The end of the movie kind of goes to the wall, but like there's a lot of high brain astronomical ideas going around, but they always service the drama, and Nolan movies don't necessarily focus on that primarily, and I feel like this movie does from the get-go and basically does almost the entire runtime.
Yeah, I agree, and even from the beginning of the movie to me, really like the big main hook moment where they go from, I forget, chasing the drone, I believe, or something like that in the truck, the first big set piece, to like the point where they show the government facility to them. I remember when the government facility showed up, I was like, this is kind of abrupt and clunky, just the transition here for me. I remember the underground bunker where being like, this is, I don't know, just kind of weird, I think. But like there's parts of the movie that quite frankly are that way. Like I think that Inception was like the follow-up to Dark Knight, where it's just like refined, fine-tuned, peaking. Dark Knight Rises was a clunkier movie than The Dark Knight, and I'm a defender. I love the movie. I'm not saying anything negative about it, but I mean, let's be real.
So many guilty pleasures in The Dark Knight Rises, and I would say The Dark Knight Rises is probably in my bottom 3 Nolan movies, just objectively.
Exactly.
I love it too, but I think The Dark Knight Rises was just kind of that obligatory, make this, we got to finish the trilogy, we got to follow up The Dark Knight. I mean, come on, who wouldn't? So there were some great ideas, and then there was some not so great execution, perhaps, and the script's kind of too bloated.
Exactly.
We probably said some of those things in our Dark Knight trilogy episode. And then I think after Dark Knight Rises, Nolan got his passion project Inception out. He got Dark Knight trilogy done, and Interstellar can be a little clunky, but it's I think it's because he's trying something pretty darn new to him compared to those movies prior.
Oh yeah, and that's what I was gonna say, is like it is clunky. There are parts of it where I'm just like, that just was a little sloppy. And once again, I'm not saying like I could have done the story better or anything like that.
Right.
I think very few filmmakers or storytellers could, but it's not quite Inception level refined for me. But where it really shines, it really, really shines and has some major highlights. And that's kind of
where my bias comes in. Like, I get so charged up by like the emotions of characters when they're well acted and they're well written, and like, again, this is like a Nolan brother freaking script. I mean, so sometimes the scripts are kind of like you said in Inception, like they can have expository dialogue, they can have stuff that takes you out of it. God, this movie doesn't for me, and I don't know. They felt it deep down for this movie. His real life relationship with his daughter was kind of the inspiration for these fictional father and daughters, that what they are going through, and I don't know. Maybe that was just a powerful enough inspiration to make the script a little better.
I think this is going to be something that everybody's going to disagree with me, because he's got much more ambitious things. He's got much more, look at the set pieces he's done and all that, and the technology used and camera stuff. But in terms of just like a character scene, I'll put it that way. In terms of the character scenes he's done, I think the part where Matthew McConaughey is watching footage of his family members growing up and just losing his shit is like my favorite Christopher Nolan scene.
Right. Oh, no, it's absolutely, I don't know if it's underrated, because I feel like a lot of people love that part. And I think that's when the movie kicks it up from like A minus to like an A fucking plus, and it just pretty much continues after that.
Yeah, there's moments like that in it where it's just so effective and so
Right.
well done that you just don't care about the faults of the movie.
It's a long movie. It's like 2 hours and 44 minutes. Like it's long as hell. So for the first like 80 minutes, you're kind of meandering somewhat, and I think a lot of it's necessary because this is a goddamn space epic. Like this might be the closest thing to a modern like 2001 Space Odyssey, and they're very different. I don't want to compare them in that way. But I feel like that's kind of partially what's being gone for here, I guess.
Definitely, I know what you mean. Like they're very different movies in many ways, but the general ambition, the way that space is approached and stuff. For instance, like just the way it's portrayed, it's not like an action movie where they're getting into space battles or anything.
I would say they're both movies about existentialism, but in different ways.
Yeah. So one of my biggest faults of movies,
Space Odyssey is more about the existentialism of just like you and your relationship to the universe, which is so fucking cerebral. And I need to rewatch 2001 because the first time I didn't love it, but actually, that's a movie I have to rewatch. And I think Interstellar is more a movie about the existentialism between you and your loved ones, primarily.
yeah, and we gotta do a 2001 episode. I'd love to do that. 2001 to me is probably my favorite Kubrick movie, which I don't know. I really love Eyes Wide Shut. That's kind of one that's like it's kind of his Interstellar or something, where it's a little bit clunkier than others, but I love that movie. Kubrick is just a 10 after 10 after 10, Paths of Glory, Clockwork Orange, and all that, The Shining. But I think 2001 is probably the best science fiction movie ever made, even though it's not my personal favorite.
It's certainly maybe the most influential, and even I can say that, and I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's hard to say. There'll be a whole episode about that later.
So anyhow, my biggest issue with this movie, it's just such a sci-fi trope. It's one of those things I just don't fuck with. There's some tropes that I love and I celebrate. For instance, the bad guy and the hero teaming up to fight a bigger bad guy. Love it. Every time.
Right. I feel like most people
together a team. Love it.
Right.
Alcoholic Detective. Love it.
You're right.
Love transcends science. Not into it.
Right. Well, and so it's a great debate, right? Because to me, when I watched the movie, I watched it more than once in theaters as well. I watched it twice. It was one of the first movies that wasn't a sequel, wasn't a franchise, wasn't a superhero, Star Wars, whatever, that I was like frothing at the mouth to go see. Because at this point, I was a Nolan fan. I'd watched his filmography, and I was in my first year of college, and I was like, shit, I'm ready for this movie. I was kind of growing up as like somebody who liked film. Mm-hmm. And seeing it twice in the theaters, I know Anne Hathaway has that clunky dialogue of like, maybe something is more powerful than science. Maybe it's love. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to kind of ignore Anne Hathaway here for a second.
Well, it's funny because it kind of gets missed in the scene too. The characters are like, oh God. And I was like, oh, that's funny. They made fun of that trope.
Exactly. And I think it's kind of like, how, well, maybe you don't know because you haven't seen The Last Jedi, but like Kylo Ren, The Last Jedi is like, let the past die. And some people are like, that's the theme of the movie. And I'm like, wait, no, it's not. Like the villain is saying, let the past die. There might be some credence to part of his statement, but that doesn't mean that's the theme of the whole movie.
Every good lie is a half-truth.
Right, it's a half-truth, right? And I feel like Anne Hathaway's clunky dialogue in that scene is a half-truth. I feel like what the movie really, to me, and it's subjective, to me, the movie is trying to say there's no more powerful motivation than love for other people. Because if you look at what is done and accomplished in the movie, it's because Cooper and these other characters and his daughter in another freaking galaxy, because they're empowered by their love for other people that they even achieve the impossible, that they even go inside a black hole or they figure out the equation. They're motivated by love for other people. And I don't like it when people say, well, the movie's trying to say that quantifiably love is better than science. I'm like, no, that's not what I get out of it. It's that love is powerful to you on a personal level, and maybe we can achieve impossible things because of it, which is cheesy, but to me that's more powerful of a notion than, like, Hathaway sentence.
No, and you are right. It is true. Like, it is portrayed differently in the context of the film than her line there. But it is always something. That line is always like, oh god.
Written. I think that scene is actually poorly written, and it's too often quoted as like, well, that's where the theme is spelled out right away. And I'm like, no, that's just one character in a big story saying what she thinks. And she's like, we have to, keep in mind characters bias, right? Like, she's saying something like that when she is desperately trying to convince the group to go to the planet that her estranged lover went to like 10 years ago. Like, she's very biased as a character, so she's kind of like grasping at straws. And I feel like people just forget that context, and they're like, well, Anne Hathaway said love beats science. And I'm like, god damn it, would you pay attention to the whole picture? Like,
that's true, because I always kind of like remembered as like she was a scientist saying that. I was like, if a scientist said that in like a lab.
Oh, she was desperate for that Edmund Wolf dick, man. That's what she wanted in that scene right there. I mean, come on.
I get it. I don't blame her, but
right.
But no,
yes, I want the dick.
Anyhow.
Anyway, I get really passionate about that when people say, well, that's what Interstellar is trying to say. Fuck science. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, most of the plot contrivances are actually based on, like, real things that gravity does to planets and time and, like, all this other shit.
And
like,
my understanding, a big push with the film was, like, to get an interest in space again, to get more money for NASA. Not, like, directly, like, donations as far as I'm aware, but a big push for it was to get scientific research into space again.
Yeah, well, that kind of propaganda, I'll just straight up call it propaganda, is very evident in this movie. It's kind of, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but when you have the protagonist telling a very obviously stupid school principal and teacher, in some people's minds, like, well, maybe you should have made more MRIs so you could have saved my wife's life. Maybe we need smart people. Like, you're obviously going to be inclined to agree with the protagonist who's putting other tertiary characters in their place, right? So I agree with you. It's a very much maybe a NASA propaganda on the side, which I'm fine with. We probably do, it kind of celebrates the hope and wonder that space brings. Interstellar does that very well. Even though it's a sad movie, it kind of tries to capture that landing on the moon essence, and I think it does it very well, actually.
Yeah. What I was gonna say with the Anne Hathaway line for me is that I kind of feel the same way as we talked about this in another episode, which is kind of non-related, a little bit loosely, was in BVS, the infamous Martha scene, where I think the theme of what they're trying to convey is really beautiful and cool, but the way that it's handled and the dialogue itself is so awkward that it kind of drops the ball for that. And that's kind of like the Anne Hathaway thing.
Yeah, because I remember that episode. We had a very passionate conversation. For those of you who haven't watched it or don't want to skim through the whole video, we basically said that, you and I both found it very compelling that at the very moment where Batman would kill Superman, realize that basically just a guy. Like, that is compelling.
Well, not just that, but also that Superman has faith in humanity, even as he's about to be killed by a man, whereas Batman has none.
And so, like, both of their character arcs are coming to a changing point. They're about to meet in the middle and then go somewhere else. But the dialogue that was written just played off of the stupid fact that for 80 years in comic books, their mothers both have the same name, Martha. Like, when you simplify it like that, that's just silly, you know. The drama
Yeah.
is lost. So I kind of feel like that's a really great comparison.
Thanks. Yeah. So yeah, I think all this stuff with the family, all this stuff with like there's this urgency throughout the whole film, and this builds on other themes. There's always a time bomb of some sort in
Oh yeah,
Nolan's movies. Inception has that a lot, especially towards the
this movie does
climax.
too, because basically once they lift off from Earth, and Michael Caine says the Dylan Thomas poem, which part of it is tattooed on my back, so that might kind of give away the rating I give for this film later. Um, Basically from then on out, it's a time bomb for like 2 hours.
Exactly, because the whole time, like anytime they make any mistake or go to any planet that has a different passage of time, you're just like, come on, go get the fuck out of there. You got to do this.
Yeah, like that's what the water planet. What was it? I don't remember. I don't remember what the water planet's name
Waterworld.
was. It's just Waterworld. Oh God.
SeaWorld.
I mean, hey, it's the most Waterworld in any water space movie.
Yeah.
Let's be real. It really is just water. So
It's a pretty scary planet, though. Like, as someone who has a fear of the ocean,
that
um,
must be many people's like personal hell. Like just ocean, just the whole thing. It's
oh,
it's very serene.
I have very, I mean, I love the water. I love the ocean. I'm obsessed with sharks, but like, I have so many nightmares about just swimming in an open body of water. You can't see land. You can't see really the sky, and you don't know what's
Right.
underneath you. It's just endless ocean. And
It's almost claustrophobic, even though it's like the exact opposite of claustrophobia. It's kind of weird.
exactly.
Yeah, no, I get that. When especially, I love, and Interstellar has a lot of these moments where Interstellar definitely has more CGI than most Nolan movies, but it basically has to, because like, oh, they can't make a real 100-foot wave on planet Earth, otherwise, Nolan may have killed some people. He probably would have done it. Maybe people
Yeah.
stopped him. I don't know. Like,
I don't know. They can just rent out like one of those. They have splash pools. I think they're called, where they have like man-made. But they could just rent one of those out for the
yeah,
weekend.
right. And then just film it with like a tiny camera so that it would appear very large.
Maybe he'll watch us and hire us because I think he fucked up there.
He could have went practical, damn it. Come on.
Yeah, so we might be working on Tenet too after these comments.
Oh my God. But yeah, there's a lot of moments in Interstellar where it's like, holy shit, 100-foot wave. Holy shit, this black hole, this wormhole, like my God. Like when he
Yeah,
uses CGI, it's some of the best shit I've ever seen in like computer generated effects.
yeah, and we got to talk about on that note Tars, the AI companion Roblox friend.
Right. Let's just call him Roblox.
Okay. That's really what it was. It was actually product placement before Roblox came out. They were just testing the waters to see if the world was ready for Roblox yet.
Right. They were seeing Thor drink Mountain Dew and then Spider-Man eating Doritos, and then like Nolan was like Roblox.
Um,
Anyway, you had a
but
point.
it's such a strange kind of minimalist, inhuman robot. Like typically,
Right.
robots look vaguely human, but this is just like a
So
Minecraft
weird.
character that doesn't have any like paint. He's just a gray Minecraft character.
And at the same time, I feel like that's exactly what we would make an AI look like. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
in every other movie, in every freaking other sci-fi movie, like they're actually like shaped like a human, and they're like the whole Will Smith, whatever fucking iRobot bullshit. And it's like, nah, man, we'd probably just make a Lego brick. That's probably more efficient. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Do we really need to give him a nose?
Yeah, it's just I love the first time you see Tars like move, like when he goes to like pick up Anne Hathaway. This is a very minor part of the movie. It was just fun to talk about. He like just like spins around and like chugs through the water, and then like he has like these little like prong arms like carry her. It is the most awkward shit I have ever seen, but it's like it's meant to be that way.
Exactly, and he has different movement types. Like when he's in the water, his arms make like rudder kind of things,
Right.
and
So it's actually pretty creative in how
yeah.
simplistic and dumb it is. It's actually pretty creative.
Sort of like the first. Oh, sorry.
Well, Tars is also he's funny. Like he's basically kind of even more dry but not panicky C3PO, I guess. But he's just a brick. So yeah, no, good character. I love him.
Yeah, yeah, same. Like, and what's so funny is like when he first shows up on screen, I remember thinking like, how's this supposed to work? What?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, who didn't think that when they went to the fucking secret warehouse and then, like, the rectangle just starts talking? Like, everybody had to have been like, oh,
You know
okay,
what that
that's
might have been a reference to actually, and this is Naspel.
right.
The monolith from 2001.
I was just going to say, yep, when you said it was a reference, I was like, oh shit, that's where Todd's going.
Yeah, of course.
So is it this commentary on how we worship the monolith so much we don't understand it, and then we just realize it's actually a rectangle that likes to make jokes, and like we actually just worshipped it way too much.
That's probably it. Yeah.
Yep.
They went a
So
little too
really,
far with some
Nolan
of
is
the
shitting
jokes.
on Kubrick's legacy. That's what's happening.
I think they went a little too far with some of the jokes. Like the part where Tars farts and stuff like that, and they're having the meeting, and it's very important. There's a big laser in New York they have to defeat, and Tars just rips one. I thought that was out of place, personally.
And he was just playing Galaga on his own screen, like literally on his own person. That was too much.
Yeah, was that needed?
I mean, man, it got a chuckle out of me in the theater. I tell you what.
Yeah. So
Anyway, sorry. The cynicism comes out.
I was gonna say I'm about ready to move on to Dunkirk if you are.
Well, I have a few more things about Interstellar to say.
Okay.
We talked about Tars too much. Anyway,
Yeah.
to wrap up Interstellar, I wanted to talk about like some of my favorite scenes are really towards the end of the movie. Like everything with Dr. Mann, with Matt Damon's character, is perfection. The whole scene that's like 10 minutes, maybe more, of when they realize Dr. Mann lied and fabricated data, and it's not because he's a villain, it's because he basically wants to kill himself through sheer isolation, but instead of that, he was too cowardly to kill himself. So he's just so desperate for human attention that he's willing to basically fuck over all humanity. And then just that plays so well into Michael Caine's, kind of betrayal. But you understand the sympathy for these characters because, the impossible sacrifice, as Matt Damon's character says it. It's so compelling. It's so riveting because these forces are clashing in completely opposite directions. Nobody's a bad person per se. They've done some bad things. And it just hurts. It just hurts. And you're just so enraptured, at least for me, just the entire time they're trying to save Cooper, the entire time they're trying to save the station after it blows up. That is just peak cinema to me. It's just one of my favorite sequences in any movie ever.
Did you have a moment on an equally serious note? Did you have a moment where you're describing Matt Damon's character? Is just like he wants to kill himself through isolation. He's too cowardly to kill himself though, and he's just fucking over everyone. Did it
right?
Like did a light bulb go in your head? Like, oh shit, I'm describing like every man of our generation.
I think, yeah. I mean, I think there's some universal themes there.
Yeah, it took me back. That part of the movie. There's this great episode of Twilight Zone where these astronauts land on a planet. It's a desert planet, and the one ends up killing the other two so he could conserve supplies, so that he can survive the longest on the rations. And then he keeps walking, and eventually he hears a noise, and it's the highway, and their spaceship never actually reached some other planet, Mars or wherever they thought they were. It actually just crash landed in Las Vegas desert.
Oh fuck.
And
Oh, that's
I, I
horrible.
I always thought about Matt Damon's character as that guy from Twilight Zone that killed his
Oh,
teammates.
damn. That no, that's a pretty good comparison there. I did not know about that episode. I gotta see that
Oh, it's a
someday.
great one.
Um, well, well, I think there's a lot to be said that his name is Doctor Man. You know, like he's very obviously a pretty overt symbolic reference of, oh, he is just sin. You know, sin is not necessarily being malicious and being evil, like, blockbuster cinema usually likes to paint villains or antagonists. No, sin's just, oh, I wanted something and I fucked up, and I was arrogant, thinking I could be the hero. And no, I'm actually just a man, and I want somebody to talk to. I want, like, that very basic human want is where that sin comes from. I mean, it's very overt. I'm not like a scholar in deciphering this plot, but it's so very effective still.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I've been looking into Stoicism lately, just kind of on a lark, just something to listen to. And I heard this great quote that sums that up: is badness or evil is just vice, and goodness is just virtue.
Right. No, I like that. That's pretty accurate, and I think that kind of that that thought, that line of thinking, plays into what this movie's about. Because you can look at a lot of things that McConaughey's character does as selfish too, especially early on in the movie. He's not necessarily, doing everything and going on this mission because he's got completely selfless values to save, generations 10, 100 years from now. Like, he wants to feel the adventure again. He wants to feel important again. And you could argue that that's just as selfish as what Dr. Mann does, leaving his daughter, his whole family behind.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what I always think that Interstellar is kind of a cautionary tale about, is the
Right.
cost of chasing your dreams. And yeah, his motivation in the film with the drought and all that is humanistic in many ways, but it's also about how we all kind of tell ourselves, like, oh, I need to do this good thing, but really, because in that concept of, is altruism possible when you have a conflict of interest with our own arrogance and egotism.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think about that a lot, just living, and you think you're doing good all the time, but it begs the question, is anything ever truly selfless? And this movie tries to, like, steer you in the direction of, you have to save the species. You have to be completely selfless, and the argument that, your empathy doesn't extend past your immediate family, that's a very real argument. Because we can all think to ourselves, like, man, do I know 3 generations before myself, or do I know what my great grandchildren would be like? I mean, there's a lot this movie has to say, and it's almost like going to church, and they go with that with the score. And I can't finish this discussion on this movie without talking about the score, because it's probably my favorite from Hans Zimmer. It's super overbearing. It's super pulse pounding. It's just got these organs, like, from the first minute of the movie, when, like, Cooper wakes up from the nightmare of, like, crashing, to the very end. The organs are just nonstop, and it's just kind of like Space Church. I freaking love it.
Space Church sounds like a cool album title.
Yeah, well, maybe he should have named the soundtrack Space Church.
Be like some prog
I know.
album.
I know we want to move on to Dunkirk, but I just want to know, what are your thoughts, and what were you going through when the whole Tesseract scene happened? And because the movie throws a lot at you at the end, where it's like, oh, this 5-dimensional space, and you can put Morse code in a watch, and it's a lot to take. It's a lot to fucking be like, okay.
Yeah,
So what were you going through there?
it was one of those moments where, honestly, like, when they first do that and it gets into the weird interdimension or whatever the fuck time travel library thing, where I was like, oh, this movie might drop the ball. You don't know, because it's a huge risk. Whenever anything that huge happens in a movie, it's always like they're really going for it here. It's either gonna stick the landing or fall on its face. And
Right.
I don't know how much it did either for. Like, it definitely didn't drop the ball. It wasn't like, oh fuck this. I don't know
Right.
that it was 100% sold on it. The stuff with him being the ghost in the house from the beginning, it's clever. It's good.
Yeah.
The special effect of it's interesting. I don't know if it's 100% sold with it, but I wasn't against it either. I don't know how to just put it on, like, I was cool with it, but it
Right.
didn't
I
floor
can
me.
relate because they're asking you as the viewer. Let's be honest, if there is that unknown past the black hole horizon, none of us will ever know. People living today. Let's be real, right? So like, it really asks you to suspend belief, but it comes to a point where it's like, shit. I mean, I'll fucking, sometimes when something is so impossible to know, it's like, okay, I can kind of accept that we're going sci-fi instead of just um science fiction, I guess. There's like a difference there where the science fiction makes it sound like the fiction is based off science, which it is largely for a lot of this movie. The serene planets are like kind of based on like actual environments that might
So
occur. But and then the Tesseract is like, hey, maybe. You
they
don't know.
didn't actually go inside the black hole to film that part.
Yeah, I mean, if Nolan could have, he probably would have.
Did you ever see it's a meme. It said it was going back to 2001. Um it was like conspiracy. It was that the moon landing was faked by Kubrick, but the truth
Right.
is that Kubrick was hired to fake the moon landing, but he's such a perfectionist. He went to the moon to film it.
There you go. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. We still got
Yeah.
there.
But
Right.
yeah, it was one of those moments for me where it's like, oh, this is a huge moment, and ultimately I was just like, I was cool with it.
Right. And I think that's really the part of the movie. It's the climax. It's like that's really where you're either propelled, in your belief in the scene by the emotions or you're not. The movie had spent 2 hours and 20 minutes up until that point building up the emotional side of the story. And once you get sucked into a black hole, it's like, hey, you're either bought into that plot between the father and the daughter or you're not. So emotionally, I'm super tied to the scene where it's like, this is some powerful shit. Basically, we've
Yeah.
gotten to the point where we've reached the unknown. We've reached the extent of which science can inform the plot of Interstellar. So Nolan's just hammering the theme of love being a powerful motivator, which I'm fine with, because it's not like it can be disproven, whatever the hell is happening in Interstellar. And wouldn't it be some crazy shit that like 300 years from now or something, they actually figure out the black hole nonsense and they're like, holy shit, Christopher Nolan was right. It is 5-dimensional beings. Like, they made this shit. Wouldn't that be the most hilarious thing?
What would be kind
I
of
would-
funny was if someone went the black hole, like of our generation somehow, because you never know. I mean, we know, but you never know.
Or they send a TARS in there and then they're like, oh, okay, TARS can see. Like,
Yeah, yeah, we sent a roadblock into the black hole, and
Exactly.
and they were like, I don't know, it wasn't quite like the movie. Actually, it was kind of boring, kind of sucked.
Well, then that would only feed the idea of like, oh, I guess that's why they made it so fantastical. Fine, and it's just kind of like whatever.
Yeah, the movie really overhyped it.
Right. I don't know. It's definitely it's a powerful scene for me, and I guess
It is because it's
You can go
not only did Cooper go to like basically not the edge of the world, the edge of the universe, out of love for his daughter, but you also get the tension at an all-time high because he's on the other side of the bookcase and he's trying to leave clues and he's so close to
Right.
it so far at once. And visually, that part of it really did work, I think.
Yeah, and like he's acting his ass off too. So like there's that going for it. Like he really is. Like
Oh, yeah. It was
I don't
even
know how you
Renaissance in
get in the
full swing.
headspace of an actor to be like, okay, I'm floating in nothingness and I must pretend that I have this daughter that I can't communicate with across like a billion light years. All right, time to act that out. Like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you just have to get into the core human emotion of
Yeah,
missing family and just try to milk that for every drop.
for sure. And I think that's done in the scene. I mean, like, because if that had dropped the ball, the performance, like, that would just be a man floating in CGI otherwise. I really love that, and I think that's really just if you focus more on the symbolic nature of the scene instead of like the science part, because they give a lot of dialogue between him and Tars where he's like, well, the fifth dimensional beings created this space so that you could see and blah blah blah. If you like focus less on that and more on this is representing the failure to listen, the failure to communicate between father and daughter, and maybe if they try hard enough, they can bridge that relationship. And kind of bridging a relationship across time and space is a good analogy. The relationship struggles that we face, we're not, trying to communicate through a black hole, but sometimes metaphorically communicating with our loved ones can feel that way. You love so deeply and so hard, and yet things can still go to shit. And like, that's kind of what that scene means to me. So I kind of think of it more in that headspace when it gets all cerebral and black holey.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that and relate to that. How some even family members that I care about more than anything. It's so fun. It's like almost like the relationship's easier in theory than in execution, where you don't quite know how to communicate the things you feel, but
Right.
the feeling's real. There's just some kind of, disconnect. I think that's a very universal feeling.
Exactly. And then with the watch, the reason they can end up communicating is because they have so much stock in their relationship that this seemingly worthless object, a watch, can simultaneously mean so much to both of them. That's how they can communicate. So it's kind of like, if you do have a powerful bond, like, you can make it through it anyway, kind of deal. And it's just a hopeful message for, like, honestly, what is a pretty challenging and bleak movie with, him crying and seeing his family grow up without him, and all these other tough scenes. It all is just so cathartic at the end.
Yeah, and then ultimately you get that scene of young McConaughey, young 50-year-old McConaughey going to see his daughter who's an old woman on her deathbed.
Yeah,
And you don't
which is
really
always
get
just it's weird. It's hard to know what to feel. It's just kind of like an acceptance thing at that point too. Kind of like Inception was an acceptance thing where it's like, hey, we did it. We did what we had to do, but like, she has other family, and he just kind of backs out of the room, and it's a bittersweet moment.
yeah.
It's like a we did it moment, but it's like it's over in like a minute, and that's it. So, and then it's just kind of, I think it gets another message in there at the very end where it's like, sometimes if your loved ones, I guess, leave your life, and it's hard to imagine that, right? But if they leave your life for whatever reason, it's probably not going to be because your daughter is 80 years older than you. That's probably not going to be the reason why.
Not typically.
And not typically. But if your loved ones leave your life, you still got to find that purpose. And that's more of a good selfish. And Cooper still goes out to go find Anne Hathaway at the end of the movie. But I would kind of quantify that as like a good selfish, where it's like, what else does he have to do at this point? Might as well go pursue that good selfish desire and, see what follows after that. And again, it's kind of one of those final shots of like, who knows what happened after that. And it's kind of fun to imagine.
Yeah, and well, not just that, but there's also the theme with the family being there and her being away that, in your own life, when you have estrangement from anyone, family, friend, you're not the only one growing. You're not the only one going through changes during that
Right.
separation. And it's also about how there's two sides to every story. And the moment for me, this is maybe the lamest thing I'll ever say on the podcast, but there's a line on the new Taylor Swift album. This it just hit me. This will be the last time that I'll ever get to imagine what it'll be like next time you see me. Kind of deal. And
Right.
and that's kind of the vibe I get from it, where it's like you have all these grandiose emotions, these cinematic, really ideals about what it's like to reconnect with someone that you maybe didn't end things in a way in which you got closure from. But
Right.
typically, when you have those encounters, it's actually usually more often than not kind of awkward and underwhelming. And usually, as soon as you're in those situations, before long, you soon want to get back out of them.
No, I feel like we've all felt that. I've, imagined things with like parents or family. And it's like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to tell them how I feel, or I'm going to do, and it's going to be great. And then it's like, oh, yeah, reality is usually, it's a reality check. And it could have milked that scene with him and, old version of her like way more. And I'm glad they had the restraint to not do that, because that is more commonsensical for sure.
Yeah. So
I guess we should rate Interstellar because it's been a while.
yeah. I'm gonna go for Interstellar. So once again, it's gonna seem a little bit harsh in the other movie, but it's really not to any detriment of the movie so much as it's just a little more uneven. I'd probably give it an 8.5 out of 10. I really
Right.
like the movie. I've got some issues with it. Really, the reason I'm going 8.5 rather than 9 more than anything is just because I'd be just the runtime. I'd just be less likely to rewatch it because it's such a long movie that has those
Right.
issues. But I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just gonna say it. It's a 10 for me, and it's really one of those movies that hits me where I live. Somehow, sometimes people say his movies are emotionless, but there's something about it that, especially with Inception and Interstellar, um, that and The Dark Knight. Those are my three favorite Nolan movies by a long shot. Because I guess they just kind of they tackle grandiose ideas, but still keep it really grounded. And I agree with a lot of the things that you've said, where it's a little bloated, it's a little long. But I've also rewatched this movie actually like a dozen times. So for 3 hour movies, as far as 3 hour movies go, it's probably the easiest movie for me to rewatch that is like that long. So I've kind of held it up to that test over the years, and I really don't come away from any rewatch like liking it less. It's just the high points are just so high that I kind of forgive the other stuff that I could give it a lower numerical score for. But I'm also a shill, so there's also that. So
You know my
I wouldn't
thoughts
give all
on
the movies a 10,
Interstellar.
by the way. Was that?
You know my thoughts on Interstellar for its length and the highs and lows. It's basically a double album. I'll put it that way.
Yeah,
Where it's like
pretty much.
Inception for me is like, it's like a solid like 10-track album. Maybe like one bridge doesn't quite cut it for me.
Right.
And Interstellar is like a double album where it's like the tracks on it that hit are like some of the band's best. It's got some showstoppers. You definitely want to go hear those songs live if you ever see them in concert. But then it's
Right.
got some of the double track stuff.
That's a pretty good description. Also, in terms of like conceptually, but also lengthwise. Like, yeah, no, I can see that. Well, do you want to move on to Dunkirk? And we probably have to end it here.
Yeah.
Good reasonable time. And I honestly have less to say about Dunkirk than Inception and Interstellar, mainly because I've only seen Dunkirk twice, which in terms of me watching Nolan movies is very little.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's funny because I think Dunkirk might be. No, it's not the only film that I've already reviewed. Because I reviewed BVS, I know that when I was still with Renaissance Men.
All right.
So this might be the second one they've already reviewed, and I only saw it once, and my thoughts haven't changed much, so I don't have too much more to add to it. So it might be a bit anticlimactic, but the one thing I do want to bring up is there's a kid in it who wants to help, and he was memed for quite a bit because he gets on the boat, and he was in a Killing of a Sacred Deer, which was one of my favorite films of the decade. He was the antagonist in that. And his first line's like, "I'll be useful, sir," and he immediately falls down like one step and dies. And there's a bunch of memes like where he says, "I'll be useless, sir," or it'll be him just fall down one step, die. But one of my favorite jokes
Yeah.
of all time was one of those memes where it had a picture of him and it said he Dunkirked his head.
Oh my God. Oh, that's a review of Dunkirk, folks. 3 out of 10. Jesus Christ. Okay, but let's talk about that, because those who haven't watched Dunkirk, Dunkirk is very it's a Nolan take on a war movie. So at the same time, it's very Nolan, but at the same time, it is very much not, because he hasn't done anything like this, and I don't think he ever will again. It's really an outlier in his filmography, for good and bad reasons, I think. For one, I don't think Dunkirk is as rewatchable as a lot of his movies, because it is, there's so many war movies. There's so many, right?
They take a lot out of you too. At least for me as a viewer, like war movies are fucking depressing. They're stressful.
For sure.
I mean, I love them. I'm not saying I don't enjoy them, but it takes a lot out of me.
Right. And I can't think of a war movie that I'd want to watch like every year. Like, it's just too much. And like, I admire him wanting to tackle World War I in a very grounded, visceral way. Like, I just talking about it, I want to rewatch the movie a third time. It's also, it's got the split timeline of land, sea, and air. But at the same time, you're right. It's got these kind of weird moments. Like, I consider the main plot twist of Dunkirk to be what you just described as the meme of the movie. Like, this kid just dies, and it's just kind of like, what? And I understand it's probably a commentary of like, there will be undue casualties in war, but it's so interesting, and it makes you think. Like you said, it's also it's hard not to see a little humor in it, because it is just so out of left field.
It really is, and I hate saying this because I think this is such a tight movie, even though obviously I really enjoyed his other two that we were talking about. I think this was like a return to form in many ways from that Dark Knight Inception, just like perfection as a filmmaker. In some ways, even fine-tuning it more so than those ones had. And that fucking kid falling down one step and dying is like really my only issue or nitpick with it. And
it is. I don't know.
So
I don't even know
funny
if I like it or dislike it, dude. Like, I know. I just can't forget it. I don't know. Like,
yeah, and I know that stuff happens and all that. Like, but I just like. I don't know. It's just like he falls down one step on a boat and just dies. It's like, fuck,
and it's
really,
and it's part of Cillian Murphy's character's fault, right? Because he's like,
he has like PTSD,
all shell shock, and like, don't fuck with him. Like, the captain of the boat is like, hey, don't fuck with him, and like, he kind of fucks with him a little bit. Not bad, but like, he's trying to help. What I can recall,
yeah,
they're trying to keep him. They're trying to keep Cillian Murphy's shell-shocked character like in the cabin of the boat, like make sure he's safe and secure, and that doesn't work out. And well, he's dead now, and everybody's just kind of like, throughout the rest of the movie, they're like, well, he wanted to be useful. Good boy. Like, I don't know, man. It's really hard to, and I know it's not a character movie. This is. Of all Nolan's movies, this is the least character-driven movie of them all. Like, I don't even there's no question there. Because it's about the character is the war. The character is like the conditions and the resilience of many men. It's not and they use the main actors to kind of tell that story, right?
Yeah. Well, what I love about this movie is that it takes me back to like early George Lucas, like THX. Where it's all about like this exciting experimental film, or like Koyaanisqatsi and stuff like that, where the cinematography, the filmmaking itself, the images depicted, it's like pure cinema, and the characters like in it are subjects more so than they are characters. Right.
And I'm a character guy. I mean, let's be honest. I love to write because I write characters. So this movie is it's not made for me as much as Inception and Interstellar. And again, I got to recognize that bias, because like, in rating the movie, in many ways, Dunkirk is a tighter movie than Interstellar. but I love Interstellar way more. And that's not right or wrong, but I just have to recognize that. And this is like, in that way, this is a less Nolan movie, because the Dark Knight trilogy has very eccentric characters. Inception and Interstellar have very prominent protagonists with very defined arcs, and then Dunkirk less so. And it's really about the pure cinema, you could say, of it.
Yeah, it's really just this editing of this marriage of editing, cinematography, and music, just to
Oh yeah,
create this
I mean,
synesthesia.
those three things are flawless in this movie. I can't really argue that. I mean, who could?
Yeah.
Might be
Um.
some of the best work in that area. I remember talking with some other folks in college when this came out, and just kind of the idea of like, and Nolan's doing all of these really long tracking shots, these wide movements, these longer takes, a lot of things, cinematography wise, that he didn't do a whole lot of. He just did it more. And just the movie looks beautiful.
Yeah, I saw a video just today because this one I looked some stuff up on too because I didn't remember it quite as well as Interstellar. And in Tarantino, I think he put this as like his second favorite movie of the decade. He said he was going through his movies. It was originally number seven. I think I put it
Really?
for like number two when he watched it like 3 or 4 times.
Wait, Tarantino's second favorite movie of the decade is Dunkirk?
Yeah, I mean like
Wow.
Tarantino has some questionable taste. I mean he's definitely
Well,
vouched for some stinkers, but that shocked me like this one that much.
yeah. We'll have to do a whole Tarantino episode, maybe two, at some point. 'Cause I have very complex feelings about him as a director and his movies. Um, yeah, no, I did not know that. That's an interesting fact.
Yeah, that shocked me. I agree with you on Tarantino. I mean, I like him, but I feel like I heard once that Family Guy will never be as funny as it was when you were 13. And I feel like Tarantino will never be as cool as when you were 13 watching Pulp Fiction.
Right, right. Which I was actually 18 watching Pulp Fiction for the first time. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, I feel like, I don't know. I don't want to get into a whole episode of Tarantino talk, but I
Yeah.
kind of agree with you.
But going back to Dunkirk, yeah, it's funny because like I have so much less to say about the film. A, because it's not as fresh in my mind, but B, because I just think it's funny because like the editing, the way that the stories are staggered, so that it's told out of sequence, so that you're just getting this constant adrenaline rush the whole time you're watching it. And and the funny thing is like you could really get into that stuff, but the story itself seemed pretty simple. Like you said, there's not much character moments. Even a lot of the
Right.
themes is just about like you know the heroes being kind of the unlikely saviors and being so close and so far yet again, which is just a major theme in Nolan's work, is just this tension of like you're almost there, you could see it. They mentioned constantly they could see, I forget, England or something like that, um, in the ships, but you're just not there. You're in the home stretch, but you're not on the home plate yet.
Yeah, no, I get that. Like that feeling is maintained from some of his other movies. Yeah, the story is that it's as simplest as possible. It follows history like to a T. Basically, the story I could sum up in one word: it's resilience. The movie's just
Yeah,
about all the different characters just being resilient. It's like, okay, we're surviving, because in a lot of war movies, there's a goal. Saving Private Ryan. I hear 1917 is kind of similar. I haven't seen it yet. Um, they want to save somebody, or they want to win this battle. Dunkirk is like, oh, we just want to live. Like, we're
yeah,
just trying to not die. Like, I don't know if there's a lot of war movies where like that's just it. Like, that's just it, And there's something really kind of intimate about that I like.
definitely, yeah. And that's the thing. The whole film is just, I mean, Like it's the kind of movie like you have like the popcorn blockbusters. This is like one where like you're not even eating your popcorn because you're just kind of glued to the screen, just like
Right.
so anxious the entire movie. It's very similar to the Safdie brothers, who did a Good Time with Robert Pattinson and Uncut Gems, the Adam Sandler one. And it's just like movies constantly building in tension and momentum as one action leads to another, and that's very similar to how this film functions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think because of that, Dunkirk is such an immersive film, and I feel like when I'm watching it, I like it more than I remembered, or I like it more in the moment of watching it. Like there's nothing else, right? I mean, I remember the movie opens with like just kind of like a very unceremonious like rain of gunfire as like this kid essentially is just running away from it. Like that's how the movie starts. It's just kind of like a, oh, we're in this. Like it's just, it's not like this pompous, the music's swelling, the older version of the character. I'm referencing like Saving Private Ryan here is
Yeah,
like he drops to his knees in front of the gravestone and they're like, oh shit, some shit went down. And I love Saving Private Ryan. I think it's a
I do
great
too.
movie.
With that, I do agree that beginning and ending. I think even at
But
one
it's
point, like it fades to an American flag.
right. Yeah, yeah. No, it's very patriotic. It's very, this, that. And I almost think Dunkirk is like the antithesis to Saving Private Ryan. It's just like, no, it's not that glamorous. It's not that dramatic. I mean, it is dramatic, but it's just like, no, this is raw human survival at this point.
Yeah,
That's
and
really what it makes me feel like the entire time, which it's just kind of like a movie experiment, more of like, can Nolan get not sympathy? Can Nolan get empathy out of you for these boys? You don't even really remember their names. You don't know who they are, but can he draw empathy from you for them for this situation without the big expository knees to the ground gravestone scene? Can he do that for like 2 hours plus?
exactly. And just to back it up for a second, yeah, with Saving Private Ryan, I mean, it has that with the beach scene, the storm of Normandy. And what's so interesting is like if it would have began with that scene, which I think most people at this point say it should have just cut the bookends and just began at that point and ended with Tom Hanks's character,
Right.
bleeding out as the Allies come to save the day and save Private Ryan. Um, but there's a huge debate in the film community about Spielberg and his use of stuff like World War II. He has a lot of stuff with Nazis, of course, and especially Schindler's List. I wish I could remember the director's name, but he directed Funny Games. Michael Haneke. I believe this was him who said this, and if not, I apologize. So don't quote him on this. But he said that he found it offensive that Spielberg has like this John Williams score swelling as mothers and children are being sent to gas chambers in Schindler's List, and he finds that very offensive to make a something so serious in history cinematic. And I see where he's coming from. I disagree with Haneke on just about everything, but I get where he's coming from. But I also think Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan are two of the best films of all time. So
Yeah, I mean, there's a debate there. There's like a conversation to be had there at least, because like I can see where he's coming from. I don't know if I would agree with it. I actually have never seen Schindler's List, and it's one of the movies at the top of my bucket list here. Um, but yeah, I mean, and Dunkirk kind of strips away a lot of that. It does have a Hans Zimmer score. It's more muted than Hans Zimmer usually is. And it is less grandiose, I think, than some of those 90s, 80s, 70s war movies are. It's kind of like the modern war movie to me, because they really don't make a whole lot of those World War movies anymore. I mean, again, I know 1917 came out, but it's not something we're doing every couple of years anymore.
no. And what I found kind of interesting was as I was leaving the theater, I mentioned this in my other review of it too. There were some people leaving, and this girl was like, I like that movie didn't like try to glamorize war and make it seem awesome. And on one hand, at
Right.
first I was like, oh yeah, I get that. And then I thought about it for half a second, I was like, what movie does that? What movie's like war's fun? Rambo
I
3?
Yeah, I think I can kind of see where that comment comes from. And again, when you're making a movie about war, like you said, they're depressing, they're exhausting. There's a line that it's different for every person watching, but I guess you could see, the nationalistic kind of pride, the American flag imagery, the Arlington Cemetery scene. I'm going to keep referencing that 10 times because it kind of is like, it sticks out in your brain. I actually cried the first time I watched it, and I was just like shook by it. But I was like 16. I didn't know how to feel. It was good though to me back then, and I don't know. It's a complicated relationship, but the way shots like that and scenes like that are blended with war kind of does glamorize it as like so ultra heroic, and we still do that in our culture as see going to war as the ultimate thing a hero can do. And we do glamorize it in that way, like the actual actions of like eating shitty food and like killing people. Like, yeah, we don't think those are great things to do, but we glamorize the heroics of it. And I think Dunkirk, it does that less because it's more focused on how shitty survival is and not like fighting the bad guys. It's just war of attrition, and that kind of makes it less glamorized.
Yeah, exactly. I think at that point too, it's not like an organized effort so much. It's so much like I remember there's many scenes of like the soldiers just who are all very young, by the way. They don't look like Tom Hanks or anything. They look like children.
Like that's most of the freaking people we sent on the front lines, and then, well, not we, but like many countries back then. Like,
yeah.
People finish high school in 15, 16. There's a funny stat. It was not funny, but my brother kind of made a joke about this where average age people get their Eagle Scout now and the Boy Scouts is like 17. Then in the 1940s, it was like 14. Well, you know why? It's because like they got their Eagle Scout when they were 14, and then we shipped them off to war 2 years later. It's like different times, and they capture that well with goddamn Harry Styles and whoever the other guys are.
One Direction. I think that was the name of their troupe. One Direction.
I'm sorry, what was that? I missed that.
I said One Direction, I think was the name you were thinking of.
Yes,
Harry Styles and the boys. Yeah.
Well, I meant who was the I can't remember the main kid's actor's name.
Me either. But yeah, it just seemed like there's many scenes like I remember they're in like some kind of like boat or something that's filling up with water at one scene, and it just seemed like scared children just trying to survive.
Oh yeah, it sucks. It sucks.
They weren't like flexing and like shooting a machine gun and
stuff
like that.
Well, and there's a lot of what's his name? The Mark Wylans or whatever. Guy who's like the captain of the sailboat that you're following most of the movie. I think he has multiple lines in the movie where he's like, hey, we just sent our kids to go die for us. We should probably go pick them up, essentially, is like his whole character. Is like it's kind of like that father guilt of, oh, we have sent our children to die in an impossible war. Because back in the Battle of Dunkirk, it felt like an impossible war.
Another thing too was that all the soldiers, they were too young to have a driver's license, so like someone had to pick them up.
Jesus Christ. Thanks for bringing the levity, man. See, you just glamorized war, Todd. Come on.
I did. The war on intelligent conversation.
Yeah, well, sometimes after 2 hours, you gotta start the war on intelligent conversation, and I guess I don't have too much left I could even think to say about Dunkirk. So if we want to rate the movie, we can do it.
Yeah, I've got a weird rating on this one because like I feel like in terms of ranking, in terms of like watching them, in which ones I'd rather watch. So oddly enough, this would be at the bottom of my list, but I have to just give it like out of sheer appreciation and everything, I'm not saying it's a worse movie. I'd have to give it like a 9.5 probably. Because it's just so fucking well made. It's so
Right.
exhilarating. I'm in such awe of it as a piece of just filmmaking. And I enjoy it too. I mean, I don't want it to sound like an academic lecture, you know.
Right.
It's really hard for me to give it anything less. I originally gave it a 10, I believe, and
Right.
it's just that kid falling down the one step. That's the only thing.
You're so hung up on it.
Yeah, it's a
so
little bit
fun.
of a bigger deal than the expository dialogue in Inception. Like, it affects
Oh,
stuff more than that. That's just like, okay, you didn't need to spell it out for me, but whatever. This is like a
right.
plot point that I'm
Like
not
you
really
can't
on board
stop
with.
thinking about it the whole rest of the movie.
Yeah, and the theme of it and everything I appreciate. And I get that it's, once again, I get what they're doing, but it's kind of a Martha-ism for me, where it's like, I get what you're getting at, but I really think another draft of the script could have helped make this a little more fluid with the rest of the movie.
Right. Maybe his death could have made like, I don't know, a little less dumb meme sense. I don't know. Again, I'm not rewriting the movie. I can't put that
I was
much
gonna
thought
say
into
maybe he could have just
2 a.m.
like fallen off the side of the ship and drowned or something, but honestly, seeing him flip over the side of the boat would have been so goddamn funny.
I think that would have been too much. You
Yeah,
can't you
that
can't
would have
have like a
been
whole drowning scene in the middle of this like high paced war movie. Oh God. Oh God. Anyway, I'm gonna like laugh so much I'm gonna piss myself. So stop
we're talking
talking
about a
about
serious film about a real
Swear to God.
war.
Anyway, my rating. Okay, I I think I'm gonna give it a 9, and I kind of agree with 9.5. It's really hard because I agree it's at the bottom of my I must rewatch this a lot Nolan list. Um, it's I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to rank the movie in his filmography because it is so different. Again, my bias is that I'm really drawn to characters, and like when I'm watching the movie, I'm immersed. But I really don't think about Dunkirk a lot after it's over too. So it's kind of a I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
I would give it a solid 9. I feel like maybe it could have done a couple other things in the plot, the characters to make me care a little extra, and maybe that would go against the whole theme of the group surviving and not caring about just a couple people. But I don't know. It's hard to critique something like that too because they're very obviously going for a specific vision for a war movie, and it is. It maybe is potentially my first or second or third favorite war movie. It's kind of hard to say because I don't rewatch war movies a lot because, like you said, they're exhausting, and it's hard to rank war movies. I don't know. All I can say is it's very freaking good, and if you like movies about war, this is more towards the documentary side of things. If you could have taken a camera back into a century ago.
yeah, and that's a good point. Is it's a different genre. This really isn't a blockbuster as the other two
No.
were, and that really is a big difference. Even though like one's in space and the other's a dream heist thing, they still have that kind of popcorn blockbuster feel, even though they are a little more sophisticated.
Right. This
One,
movie does not have a lot of the Hollywood
it's not a
glamour that
crowd
you would
pleaser.
expect from a war movie with like big actors, big music. It is different.
Exactly. Here's
Which I
how I'll
respect
put it. I think I've had an irreverent comparison for the two other movies, so I got one for this. I recently watched for the first time Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and the plot of the movie begins with Jason Segel finding out that Kristen Bell was cheating on him with Russell Brand, and he goes to a resort to get over her, a vacation kind of island situation, and he finds out that she is also staying at the same place with her new boyfriend. And over the course of the movie, he comes to meet and fall in love with Mila Kunis, who appreciates him and is a supportive person, a proper girlfriend, all that. But here's the deal: is like I appreciate that objectively Mila Kunis is a better person and a better fit for him. But I'd have a better time getting cheated on by Kristen Bell than I would be with Mila Kunis. I'm just onto Mila Kunis, and
So
I do like war
wait.
movies, but I think I'd rather kind of feel a little bit cheated by Interstellar.
Okay, I was just gonna say Kristen Bell is Interstellar, Mila Kunis is Dunkirk. Okay, just wanted to make sure
Yeah,
I was reading you right here.
yeah. Like I appreciate that. Like objectively, Dunkirk's the better movie
Oh my
when you
god,
take it past the superficial details, which are
that's
still great.
that's all. Todd, I don't think anyone has ever said what you have just said. Just you just compared two Christopher Nolan movies to the two girls in Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Exactly.
I,
Someone's probably done
this
it
is why we
before.
have a podcast, folks. This is it right here.
That's what brings the views. All two of them.
I mean, you have unique explanations of things, and I love it.
That's just what came to mind. It wasn't planned. I didn't have it written down on a notepad. I'm sure you probably think I have a dry erase board with formulas, and it's like an
Oh
arrow,
no.
and it's like Mila Kunis question mark circled, and then X
I wish,
equals
but the shit you
Kristen
say is
Bell.
so stupid that I hope you don't. Because if you had premeditated that, maybe you would have said, "Oh God, maybe I should erase this whiteboard." No, no.
That would be grounds to be institutionalized. I feel like.
Probably, probably. But yeah, if you can't tell, yeah, I mean, we both like Christopher Nolan quite a bit. I'm extra fanboy. Then again, you know, a couple of his earlier movies I think have maybe more flaws. I still like his earlier movies, and we kind of talked about his dream decade. Again, Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar are basically those three movies are in my top 10 favorite films. Can't lie, they all are. Then the rest of his films, I mean, I don't think he has any movie that's worse than like a B, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I feel like we're pretty much on the same page with Nolan. We both really like him. The only difference is that I'm not paid by his marketing team to say positive things about them on the internet.
I gotta disclose my income to my real job. Oh God, damn it. No, I mean, I feel like I'm more of a sucker for like, you know, reading into the emotions of things and characters than perhaps you or most people are, honestly. I'm just a sucker for epic emotional shit. So I just kind of get immersed in that world a little bit more. I think that explains my perhaps deeper appreciation for Interstellar, you know, compared to some of his other movies and stuff. I'm a sucker for shit like
Yeah.
that, you know,
No,
for character emotional driven shit.
I think that's probably it. People who don't care for Interstellar as much probably just don't care about people. They're probably just shittier
Right.
people, and that's why I don't appreciate it.
So are you just saying that I'm a better person than you, Todd? Is that what you're saying?
That must be it, because you gave Interstellar a 10.
That must be it. Maybe I'm just bound to have children very soon, and I just don't know it yet. But if I went into the Tesseract, I would know that I'm about to be a father
Yeah.
very soon.
Yep. Chris Zavinski.
Ew. Oh God. No, no, no. God, that sounds just horrible. I'm not naming my son Chris, man.
All right. Well, I'm Todd Crawford.
And I'm Eric Zavinski, not Chris.
We're too cool for the comic shop.